The unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. Happy Founders Day, everybody. Nice to see everybody here. Yesterday we had our Sagaki ceremonies. And when we have come to Sagaki time, we find ourselves thinking of the darker realms, beings in difficult situations. So I'm going to talk a little about, I should have some stories about beings in difficult situations. We like stories. First one is Reverend Master Koten's story that he sometimes tells of a robber who was just a very bad guy. Just spent his life robbing people. And one time he's running away from people, and there's a big spider right in his path, and he has the impulse to squash it, and he doesn't. He restrains himself and goes around and lives his life robbing people. And then he ends up in hell because of his bad deeds, and he's there for a long time. And then one day he looks up, and there's a little thread coming down from above, a kind of a spider thread. And he grabs onto this thing. It's a very strong spider thread. And he starts climbing up out of hell. Lovely, actually. But then he looks down, and he sees all these other beings grabbing onto this thread and trying to climb up too. And he gets seized with panic and says, "Oh no, don't do that, you'll break the thread." And instantly the thread breaks, and he and all of them fall back down into hell. Sigh, It's like this karmic habit he had. If you're a robber, you're living on fear and selfishness, and it's his fear and his selfishness that causes them to say, no, let go, the thread will break, and thereby, cause all of them to fall back down. As Reverend Master Koten said, if he just kept climbing, that thread would have been strong enough for all of them to climb out of hell. But his weight of his selfishness caused the thread to break. The weight of his selfishness, the weight of his karma, that selfish habit of grabbing and fearfulness, selfishness. So, Or maybe he learned generosity after that and find his way out. They say, hell doesn't last forever. Hopefully, things got better for him. Things do get better. Reverend Master used to say many times, the kindest kanzeon, the kindest form of compassion is to be found in hell. That's where you need the most compassion, in hell. Beings in hell, no matter what they've done to get there, need compassion. And all of us have had moments like this, when selfishness or fear or greed kicked in, and we did the thing we shouldn't have done. And then we think, that horrible sinking feeling, oh no, why did I do that? Or why didn't I do that? We had this perfect opportunity to do something good, and we didn't. Self kicked in, fear kicked in, and we didn't do it. Or we did do the dumb thing. We all know what it's like, because all of us have this kind of karma there. We all have fear. We all have selfishness. Maybe not as dramatic as in this little story, but it's still, we have that sinking feeling sometimes. None of us does things nobly all the time. But that lovely thing of the thread coming down, that's the most beautiful part of that story, that thread of compassion, even in hell. Just one little deed he does, and just one little tiny little deed, and there's this compassion that allows him to come out of hell, should he do it a little better than that. But there we go. We get what we need. Now there's another story. It's a true story. It's portrayed in a film called The Finest Hours. We watched this. We loved it. Somebody recommended it. I can't remember who. It's about I think it happened around about 1950 or something like that, or the 40s. There was a terrible storm off the east coast, off the coast of New England. There was a oil tanker that broke in half out at sea. Just a dreadful storm. And the Coast Guard, this little Coast Guard boat, goes out in the teeth of the awful storm, risking life and limb, to see if they can rescue the people off this tanker. And in the teeth of all possible odds, they get there and they rescue all the people. Now, this little boat is meant to hold 10 or 12 at most. And getting all these people onto this boat, finally they end up with 30-some on this boat. And people are saying, it's going to sink, it's going to sink. And the captain says, well, we all live or we all die. You know, the complete opposite response to the other story. And again, in the teeth of all odds, they get back to safety and everybody's rescued except one person who falls off the ship and they couldn't have prevented it. But everybody else, get them all on the boat, they all managed to make it back to shore. It's a lovely story, very inspiring. We'd all like to be like that. We'd all like to be like the Coast Guard captain, rising to the occasion and doing the honourable and noble thing, rescuing people. Well, there's another sea story called Lord Jim by Joseph Conrad. Some of us have read it. Young Jim is a sailor, and he longs to be noble and brave. He sort of dreams of doing some great deed, some great noble, honourable deed. An opportunity to be brave and noble. Well, the chance comes and he blows it. He has this opportunity to do the brave thing, and he sees the awful thing that might happen, and he's so overwhelmed with fear that he panics. Instead of saving the ship, when everybody else has jumped off, he jumps off too. And this follows him for his whole life. All the rest of his life, he's haunted by having done this dishonorable thing. Not only that, but he goes from port to port, and then people recognize him. Oh, that's the guy who did the dreaded thing. And then he just leaves and goes somewhere else. Just his whole life. Well, the point of the story is, Jim isn't a bad person. He's just like us. He wants to be honorable. He wants to be noble. And then the opportunity comes and he blows it. He panics, just on impulse, even without realizing what he's doing. Does the unhonorable thing. And actually, he's a noble character, and all through the rest of the book, he's trying to prove how noble he is, trying to redeem himself, doing brave and desperate things, helping people, doing things that nobody else would do, in the teeth of danger. But it doesn't work. It just keeps on coming back to him. It's never enough. It's never enough. He can never overcome this shame. And then finally, he gives his life to repay his debt. Well, it's a bit of a sad way to do it, but there we go. Maybe he found peace. But the interesting thing is that this could happen to almost anybody, to want to do the brave and noble thing, and we blow it, How painful it is when we do this selfish and not very honorable thing. And how easy it is to judge somebody else who does that, to judge Jim or this robber or whoever. But we all have that. We're all susceptible to just doing the dumb thing out of panic or doing the selfish thing because we just don't, we freeze or something. A moment of fear and selfishness. Any of us can give in to that, whether in a small way or a big way. And our training, of course, helps us to work with this, to see the fear and not just panic and give in to it. But still, we don't always do it perfectly by any means. Training does help, though, and it helps us to forgive ourselves when we do something unwise. Maybe poor old Jim could have done better than just being constantly haunted by his mistake for the rest of his life. But, our actions have consequences. Even a little action or a momentary impulse can have grave consequences. But we still have to live our life. We cannot live in fear of making a mistake. We have to just do our best and trust that it's going to be okay. Even when someone's habitually selfish and fearful, not just of one impulse, but when it's just a habit of life that they have, We probably don't know why they are this way, and we still don't have to judge them. If we knew what they were like, if we knew what they'd been through, if we knew what karmic load they might be carrying, the more we would know about a person, the less we can actually judge them. So when things happen or people do things that we don't like, we think are dishonorable or selfish, we don't really know what they're trying to deal with. And everybody has that impulse of nobility, no matter what it looks like. Everybody would wish to do better, If we knew really what people had to work with, compassion would arise, because it's our true nature to be compassionate, kind, forgiving, understanding, have sympathy. The more we know about a person, the less we're likely to judge them, and the more we're likely to be sympathetic and find kindness for them. Well, here's another hell story. I love hell stories. The asperge, the sprinkling of water, like we did yesterday. You have this, bowl of water, and the celebrant blesses it, like pouring goodness into it. And then we sprinkle it around in all the directions, all the 8 directions, and up and down. This is the story of a being in hell who looks up and receives a drop of water from the asperge into his mouth. And instead of just swallowing it without thinking, he holds it in his mouth for years and years and years. And finally it turns into a pearl. And I'm sure he's released from hell after that faithful... He didn't know it was going to happen like that. He just held this little drop of water in his mouth. And instead of just being an ephemeral drop of water, it turns into something solid and precious. It's like the merit of training, that we just hold that water and it turns into something enduring and precious that really helps us. It's a lovely story. Just, again, the compassion that can be found in hell. And it's also a story of faith and constancy. This little being, yes, holds his mouth, holds this drop of water in his mouth through hell, which is no fun at all, just through hell, through this dark, awful place. Not knowing what's going to happen. He doesn't know it's going to turn into a pearl. But he just does that. And finally, it becomes this pearl. Really lovely. And I'm sure after that, he'd find his way out pretty soon. Well, again, this is a story for us. We don't know where the merit of our actions will fall. We do a little good deed, have a little thought of kindness. We don't know how that will fall upon other beings, who it may affect, whether being seen or unseen, somebody off in the future, and we don't even think about it. We just do our best. When we use the asperge, the holy water at a ceremony, sometimes I think about this little story. I think, well, where's that water going? Not just onto the carpet, but who knows what beings will be blessed with this water, or helped, or just given a little moment of comfort with this water of compassion. Not we're making a big thing out of it. We just do it. But you just never know. When you do our little acts of kindness or say something to somebody to comfort them, or just take a little time with somebody, we're not thinking, I think it'll be a great benefit to this. We just do it without thinking. We just fling that water out without thinking about it, without thinking, I'm sure this is really going to be helpful to this person. We just do it and trust that it will fall where it needs to. The power of faith and constancy. This little being, again, not knowing what's going to happen, just holds this little drop of water. The faith and constancy of our practice. Just keeping on with training in the darkness and the light, through heaven and hell, no matter how bad it gets. Just holding that water of compassion, that aspiration to train, and it becomes something precious that sustains us. Just going on through the darkness, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing where we're going to get to, but just going on in faith because that's what we need to do. Back to our Coast Guard captain on his boat. bringing all these people back. Well, if his boat had sunk and everybody had drowned, he probably wouldn't have been such a hero. Well, they wouldn't even have known what he did. Everybody would have died and they wouldn't have known how. But he had to have faith. He had to have faith that you just do the very best you can. You do the right thing, the noble, the best, the good thing, selflessly, and trust that it will be all right. And even if it wasn't, he'd have done his very best, even if no one had ever known about it. People do all kinds of heroic and noble deeds that are never heard of, but just doing the best they can in a difficult situation. And this kind of story goes right to our hearts because it's so beautiful. We would like to be like that. Yes, we wish. We have that aspiration for nobility and selflessness and fearlessness. And sometimes we come through and sometimes we don't. Sometimes other people come through and sometimes we don't. They don't. But we don't know what it's like to be them. So maybe we can give both ourselves, when we blow it, and other beings the benefit of the doubt when it looks awful. Or somebody does something on impulse that creates horrible suffering. How do we know how they perceived it? What they were up against? What desperate situation they might have felt themselves to be in? We just can't know. So maybe we can just have a heart of compassion when things happen in this world, or people we know do things that we think, oh, why did they do that? Just have a heart of compassion and trust that there is compassion even in hellish situations, whether in a real hell, the hell of it in somebody's mind. Compassion can be found there. Whether the person sees it or not, maybe they can just turn around and see that compassion. Well, it's Founders' Day. Koho Zenji wished the Dharma to be spread in the West, and he recognized Reverend Master as the person to do that. Being a Westerner, a person of quite unusual training and integrity and strength, remarkable person, as we all know. He recognized her as the person to do that, to spread the Dharma, to spread Zen in the West. And the merit of his training and his faith in her, his sprinkling of the water of compassion over to the West via Reverend Master, it's still with us today. It's like she was the vessel that held that water and then gave sprinkled to all of us. And that because of that, we're here today, we're here now. And how many people has that compassion touched and transformed? Not just us, but hundreds of people, maybe thousands, we don't know how many people have been touched by Koho Zenji's kindness and Reverend Master's kindness, was coming and doing the very best they could. He came to the West actually and asked President Eisenhower, who was the president at the time, for permission to spread the Dharma in the West. And this is the traditional thing. You ask the ruler of the country for permission to spread the Dharma. And he did that and was given it. So he did his very best. He really wanted us to hear the Dharma and put it into practice. And we open our little mouth and receive his water of compassion, and it becomes the pearl beyond all price that we have. Our ability to train, our faith in the training, and our continual practice. And that's our talk for the day. Thank you.